Good morning. The first item of business is general questions, and at question number 1 I call Pam Gossel.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government when it plans to implement any necessary measures as a consequence of the interim update from the Equality and Human Rights Commission following the Supreme Court's ruling on the legal definition of a woman.
Cabinet Secretary Shirley-Ann Somerville.
The Equality and Human Rights Commission has launched their consultation updating their Code of Practice. It will run to the 30th of June 2025. We encourage organisations to engage with this consultation. The Scottish Government is reviewing its policies, guidance and legislation impacted by the judgment through the Cross-Government Short Life Working Group to ensure we are ready and prepared ahead of the updated Code of Practice being published. On the 15th of May, I met with the UK Government to discuss the Supreme Court judgment and our work to prepare for the updated EHRC Code of Practice. The UK Government confirmed they too are waiting for the EHRC's updated Code of Practice before issuing any further guidance to ensure consistency in this complex area of law. The EHRC have not objected to this approach from the Scottish Government.
Pam Gossel.
As expected, the Cabinet Secretary has not provided a clear answer. It's been more than 1 month since the UK Supreme Court's monumental judgment on the definition of the word woman, and almost a month since the EHRC published its interim update. 2 weeks ago, the Scottish Parliament announced that it will be implementing this update. However, bodies that are still waiting for clarity from the Scottish Government include the Scottish Secondary Teachers Association, the NHS nursing unions, with Sandy Peggy calling for the Royal College of Nursing to take a stand, and prisons needing clarity to how to handle transgender prisoners. But this Cabinet Secretary and this Government are dragging their heels. So let me ask again, when will the Scottish Government be implementing the EHRC interim update? Cabinet Secretary, this is a simple question. What is the date?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, as I've already said, Presiding Officer, but I'll try once again. The Scottish Government has already begun its work to review the policies, the guidance and the legislation impacted by that on the cross-government short life working group. It is a matter for the Scottish Parliament, the decisions that they have taken for relation to the parliamentary estate. But I can assure the Chamber that we have begun to undertake the work. I'm disappointed that EHRC cancelled the meeting with Scottish ministers where we could have went through this in detail. I remain, as I've said in my recent correspondence with the EHRC, my diary remains open to further discussions on this matter, and I hope that they will be able to take up the opportunity to speak to Scottish Government ministers soon, because I am also very determined to ensure that the Scottish Government does the work that people would expect us to do.
Ash Regan.
Officer, last week I urged the Justice Secretary to revoke the unlawful gender self-ID policy that has put male offenders, including murderers and sexual torturers, in women's prisons for over a decade. Teachers are also crying out for lawful guidance to repair a decade of lobby-led ideology. Councils across the country are losing court cases. Female prisoners denied justice and their human rights may still yet sue. An NHS Fife policy, now exposed at Employment Tribunal, is clearly unlawful. How much legal, financial and reputational damage will Scotland stomach before this Government stop dragging its feet?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, the Scottish Government has begun its work following the Supreme Court judgment, as I've said in my answers. We have detailed the decisions that we have taken in terms of how we will move forward with implementation in writing to the EHRC. As I say, they chose to cancel the meeting with Scottish Government ministers where we could have cancelled that. If the EHRC have any issues, I would expect them to write back if they have concerns around how we are implementing that judgment, or indeed my diary remains open for ministerial to EHRC direct discussions on this issue. We have raised this with them. They know our intent. I have shared that intent also and discussed that with UK Government ministers who are doing likewise, and we are determined in the meantime to move forward with the implementation. But while we await the Code of Practice consultation concluding, we will continue the work within Government.
Question number 2, Maggie Chapman.
To ask the Scottish Government what discussions the Justice Secretary has had with ministerial colleagues regarding the reported findings from a survey by the Fire Brigades Union that there is support and a need for 52 weeks of full pay for firefighters on maternity leave.
Cabinet Secretary Angela Constance.
Presiding Officer, pay and conditions of firefighters are negotiated on a UK-wide basis through established collective bargaining procedures. The Scottish Government is not part of those negotiations, as it is rightly a matter for the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service as the employer. The Minister for Victims and Community Safety has, I know, discussed the issue of maternity leave when she met with Fire Brigades Union Scottish officials on the 15th of May.
Maggie Chapman.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for her response. The FBU's Fight for 52 maternity survey report makes for stark reading. Firefighters not being able to decontaminate properly before going home to breastfeed, or having to stop breastfeeding early or not breastfeed at all because there are no safe ways to continue once returning to work. Women firefighters in Scotland also get paid over £16,000 less in maternity pay than those in many services south of the border. Will the Cabinet Secretary commit to putting in place 52 weeks of full pay for firefighters on maternity leave as part of the Fire Service's Strategic Service Review programme?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, maternity pay, like firefighter pay and terms and conditions, is, as I said, negotiated on a UK-wide basis under very well-established procedures for collective bargaining that I know that both the FBU and the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service both remain committed to. It is an important matter that the member has raised, and of course the health and well-being of staff, along with their terms and conditions, is of course a crucial matter for the employer. I am very much aware of the calls made by the FBU on the 7th of May. For information, the SFRS maternity leave is currently 26 weeks full pay, 13 weeks on statutory maternity pay, and then there are some other flexibilities. I should say that the SFRS went beyond the collective agreement by extending this to support staff. It is obviously a very live issue for the FBU, and it's important to say that there are particular operational procedures for pregnant and breastfeeding firefighters, particularly as they can't participate in operational duties due to risks of contamination.
Question number 3, Michelle Thompson.
To ask the Scottish Government to what extent it considers workers in the health and social care sector to be skilled.
Minister Marie Todd.
The Scottish Government greatly values all of our health and social care sector, recognising that they all have the skills required to undertake their individual roles within the workforce. Their knowledge, compassion and dedication are essential to delivering safe and effective care, and their contribution is vital to our public services. For our social care staff in particular, I agree with the Coalition of Care and Support Providers in Scotland, and I reject the notion that social care staff are lower-skilled workers. That term is demeaning and disrespectful, given that they provide critical and complex care to some of the most vulnerable people in Scotland.
Michelle Thompson.
I thank the Minister for that answer and absolutely echo the sentiment she's expressed regarding the quite demeaning and utterly disrespectful characterisation by the Prime Minister of social care work as low-skilled. Nigel Farage's Labour Party policy of ending skilled visa routes for social care workers is short-sighted, irresponsible and will have a disproportionate impact in Scotland, where social care vacancies are rising and we face distinct demographic challenges. To that end, what further representation will the Scottish Government make to the UK Government regarding the development of a separate pathway for overseas workers to move to Scotland and make a contribution to our society?
Minister.
A key strand of the Scottish Government's migration strategy is to engage with the UK Government and to highlight the urgent need for an immigration system which meets Scotland's demographic and economic needs. The Scottish Government issued comprehensive evidence-based proposals to the Home Office during their immigration white paper's development, including our proposals for tailored migration routes to Scotland, including a rural visa pilot and a Scottish graduate visa proposal. None of these proposals were included in the White Paper. We continue to engage with stakeholders and will ensure that their requirements are reflected in ongoing engagement with the UK Government.
Sandesh Gulhani.
A declaration of interest as a practising NHS GP. At last week's ministerial statement on the care sector, in response to my point that we should be training more people here to work in our care sector rather than rely on immigration, Minister Marie Todd said, and I quote, "To suggest that there are in the villages and communities that she represents young people who are fit, healthy and able to train in the skilled jobs that social care requires is a very challenging point to make." I found this response a shocking attitude from the Minister and a disservice to young people who I believe are capable and smart enough to be trained despite what the Minister thinks. So I'll ask again, why are the Government not willing to look at training some of our 125,000 unemployed Scots who are desperate for jobs in our care sector?
Minister.
So let me make the point again that I think that Sandesh Gulhani has just illustrated that he has absolutely no understanding of the rural communities that I represent and the challenges that we face with respect to our demography. All over Scotland, the population is only growing because of immigration. But if we look closely at the rural areas in the Highlands, the challenge is immense. I am surrounded by schools which are closing. The ageing demographic is hitting us hard, and it is hitting us first. And it is simply outrageous for Dr Gulhani to suggest that there are lots and lots of young people in the communities that I represent who are hanging around unemployed, doing nothing. It is also outrageous for Dr Gulhani to suggest that anyone, just anyone, can be trained to work in social care. That is completely untrue, and if Dr Gulhani were to engage with the social care sector, he would understand that better.
Question number 4, Ross Greer.
Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government regarding its work to support faith and belief communities, what plans it has to join the Buddhist community in Scotland in celebrating the 90th birthday of His Holiness the Dalai Lama on the 6th of July.
Minister Cocab Stewart.
The Scottish Government greatly values the rich contributions of all faith and belief communities in Scotland, including the Buddhist community. On the significant occasion of the Dalai Lama's 90th birthday, and on behalf of the Scottish Government, I offer my warmest greetings and best wishes to the Dalai Lama and the Buddhist community in Scotland, acknowledging their role in promoting peace, compassion and cultural diversity throughout the country.
Ross Greer.
Thank you. I'm very grateful to the Minister for her remarks on behalf of the Government, and I know the Buddhist community will be as well. The most important issue for Buddhists across Scotland and the world celebrating the Dalai Lama's 90th birthday is the matter of his reincarnation. When the Panchen Lama died 30 years ago this month, the Chinese Government immediately kidnapped the 6-year-old boy chosen as his successor and the boy's family, then installed their own false Panchen Lama in his place. Buddhists fear that they will attempt the same with the next Dalai Lama. The Scottish Government enjoys positive relations with the leaders of many faith groups, and His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama has made a number of visits to Scotland. Does the Minister agree that it's for Tibetan Buddhists to choose the 15th Dalai Lama in line with their traditions and teachings, and that the Scottish Government would only recognise a Dalai Lama appointed on these terms?
Minister.
I'd like to thank Ross Greer for bringing these issues to the Chamber. I am aware that he travelled to India in April and met with the Dalai Lama. The Scottish Government supports the principles of religious freedom and human rights. It believes that the Tibetan Buddhist community should have the right to choose the next Dalai Lama without external interference.
Question number 5, Carol Mockin.
Apologies. Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what recent action it has taken to improve the prevention and monitoring of malnutrition and dehydration.
Cabinet Secretary Neil Gray.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The Scottish Government is committed to preventing malnutrition and dehydration, and we have established a working group to develop recommendations for prevention, early detection and early intervention. We will shortly publish a 10-year population health framework which, alongside recommendations from the Malnutrition Working Group, will inform a new diet and healthy weight implementation plan. And the Scottish Government is also supporting Health Improvement Scotland to review the 2014 food, fluid and nutritional care standards, which aim to ensure that everyone receiving care gets safe, effective and person-centred nutritional care.
Carol Mockin.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. Malnutrition is believed to be on the increase across Scotland, particularly in our vulnerable communities. As well as this being totally unacceptable, it places significant pressures and cost on our healthcare system. Many families, including those within my own South Scotland region, face high costs, poor food availability and significant inequalities, all of which limit their access to nutritious foods. The Cabinet Secretary mentioned I believe he was referring to the Malnutrition Short Life Working Group, and it was commissioned to recommend a framework for the prevention of malnutrition and dehydration. It was over 2 years ago and we've had no detail to date. So I asked the Cabinet Secretary, can he tell us when we will actually see the framework? When will it be published?
Cabinet Secretary.
Thank you. I thank Carol Mockin for her question. As I said in response to her first question, we will be bringing forward the Diet and Healthy Weight implementation plan that has been informed by that working group alongside the Population Health Framework, which is coming imminently. There is also a significant amount of work ongoing to support people in communities to prevent some of the issues that she rightly raises as being a concern at the moment, such as work on our 5 family payments, the Scottish Child Payment, the Best Start Foods, Best Start Grant, which could be worth over £10,000 by the time an eligible child turns 6 years old. We've also got Healthy Start vitamins, which contain vitamin D, provided free to all pregnant women throughout their pregnancy. So there are a number of steps that we're taking to try to address the poverty-related drivers of poor nutrition and malnutrition that Carol Mockin speaks of, as well as responding with the framework which will be coming imminently.
Question number 6, Marie McNair.
To ask the Scottish Government whether it provide further details of initial assessment of the potential impact of the UK Government's immigration plans on the Scottish care sector.
Minister Marie Todd.
Our initial assessment is damning. Plans to end international recruitment of care workers are short-sighted and will be devastating for the care sector in Scotland, which relies on international talent, particularly in rural and island communities. The number of health and care worker visa applications has already fallen since the 2023 restrictions on bringing dependents, and now Labour wants to reduce this further. Workers from overseas have and will continue to fill vital roles in the sector. The UK Government Immigration White Paper completely fails to account for Scotland's distinct demographic needs, demonstrating why Scotland needs a tailored approach to migration.
Marie McNair.
I thank the Minister for that answer. The Chief Executive of Scottish Care, Donald McCaskill, has described this move as deeply concerning and disturbing for the Scottish care sector, and he is right. The UK Government's efforts to go to the right of Farage on immigration policy will be extremely damaging to the care sector. Does the Minister agree with me that this is just further evidence that Scotland needs the full powers of independence to maximise the capacity and skills of our social care workforce?
Minister.
I agree wholeheartedly. Scottish Care estimate that there are 15,000 to 20,000 international care workers in Scotland. The UK Government plans to end the recruitment of care workers are short-sighted and will be devastating for the care sector in Scotland, which relies on international talent, particularly, as I have emphasised, in rural and island communities. Migrants make a huge contribution to Scotland. We need a migration system that meets Scotland's needs, and the White Paper completely fails to account for Scotland's distinct needs.
A concise question number 7, Sharon Dowie.
To ask the Scottish Government what steps it is taking to support dental practices.
Minister Marie Todd.
Our significant investment in NHS dental payment reform in November 23 provided the sector with a stable platform to move forward from. Official statistics show that the NHS dental services are performing well under the new system, with over 4.1 million courses of treatment delivered to patients in 24. We have been clear that the payment reform must only be the first step in ensuring sustainability of our dental services, which is why our programme for government sets out a number of actions to improve the NHS dental workforce, both now and into the future.
Sharon Dowie.
Thank you. The SNP promised to abolish NHS dental charges, but in Ayrshire, patients can't register with NHS practices and are being forced to go private. I contacted 24 dental practices in the area. Not a single one is currently accepting new NHS patients. What is the point of having free dental care if people can't access it? What is the Minister doing to fix this? Has the Government increased the number of funded university places for dentistry? And what concrete steps is this Government taking to ensure patients can access the free, high-quality NHS dentistry they were promised?
Minister.
So, as I set out, the programme for government sets out key actions to improve the NHS dental workforce, backed by £3 million of funding in 25-26. We will expand domestic dental student numbers by 7% from September 25, supporting our annual dental workforce pipeline. We also plan to launch an innovative new training package that will support international dentists to join the NHS Scotland workforce, and we'll work with NHS boards to refine financial incentives to support dentists to move to work in more rural areas, those golden hellos that we have mentioned several times in the Chamber.
That concludes general questions. The next item of business is First Minister's questions. At question number 1, I call Russell Findlay.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Last Saturday, 16-year-old Caden Moy was stabbed to death on Irvine Beach. And less than 24 hours earlier on Portobello Beach, a 17-year-old was allegedly stabbed. Police Scotland say the number of serious assaults committed by teenagers has risen by 600% in the past 5 years. 2 teenagers have died and 11 injured during a spate of knife incidents involving youths over the past 2 months. Young people do not feel safe. The system does not protect them. So what does John Swinney have to say to parents who tell me they're terrified every time their son or daughter leaves the house?
Thank you. Thank you. Just before I call the First Minister, could I just remind members that there are a number of active cases in Scotland relating to knife crime which are sub judice, and we also have question 6 today too. And for that reason, because of the age of many of those involved, I would be grateful if members could not refer to details of any criminal proceedings in relation to those incidents. First Minister.
First of all, President Officer, I want to express my sympathy to the family of Caden Moy. It is a tragedy that they are having to come to terms with, and one incident is one incident too many. The disorder and the violence at Irvine Beach and Portobello was totally unacceptable, and as you have indicated, Presiding Officer, Police Scotland are pursuing the relevant incidents. There are 3 approaches the Government takes in relation to the issue of knife crime. First of all, we have education programmes on the danger and the unacceptability of carrying a knife and taking part in violence. Secondly, there is effective punishment where offences are committed. And thirdly, there is sustained school and community engagement with young people around making sure that we create responsible citizens in Scotland, and most of Scotland's young people are responsible citizens. We have seen sustained falls in knife crime in the last 15 years, but I repeat that one incident is one incident too many, and we will act to eradicate such incidents.
Russell Findlay.
Young people don't feel safe due to the sickening rise in youth violence, but this is not happening in a vacuum. It can be linked directly to the policies and actions of this government. The SNP has systematically weakened the justice system, especially in youth justice. They seek to make excuses for those who commit harm, and for those who do commit crimes, they are told there are no consequences for their actions, which means there is no longer any meaningful deterrent. And this inevitably fuels youth violence. This misguided thinking is at the heart of SNP policy making. Surely John Swinney can see that it is not working, and it's time to take a tougher approach.
First Minister.
As I indicated in my earlier answer, there are three elements to the approach the Government takes. Great importance is attached to education programmes on the danger and the unacceptability of carrying a knife and being involved in violence. And when we look at the work of the Mentors in Violence Prevention programme, which is directed through Education Scotland, it is delivered in all 32 local authority areas, and young people are involved in that work. And we support the work of the Scottish Violence Reduction Unit to proactively engage with young people to avoid incidents of violence. That's in addition to the work that we take forward to support Medics Against Violence, to engage young people in the work that's also taken forward by YouthLink Scotland to deliver the No Knives, Better Lives training to hundreds of practitioners and young people around the country. So there is proactive work to ensure that these issues are addressed. But there is also firmness in the justice system where incidents take place. It remains open to prosecutors to prosecute a young person if they have committed a serious offence. Our sustained focus on prevention and early intervention is a core part of our strategy, but there is also the steps that can be taken in the criminal justice system to bring people to justice, and I would expect the Crown Office and the judicial system to consider all of these issues in addressing any cases that emerge.
So Findlay.
It seems that John Swinney won't accept that his government bears any responsibility for rising youth violence. But let's look at the SNP's policies. In schools, they won't exclude disruptive and dangerous pupils. Official guidelines prevent teachers from being able to instil basic classroom discipline. He talks of firmness in the justice system. But the SNP passed a law banning under-18s from being sent to prison, even if they commit murder. And they decided that more young criminals should not be prosecuted in court. They are instead sent to children's panels, where their interests are the priority and victims are ignored. Then there are the perverse under-25 sentencing guidelines, which prevent criminals, adults by any definition, from being jailed. This approach is weak, it is reckless, and it is costing lives. Is it not time for John Swinney to rethink these harmful policies?
First Minister.
I must correct Mr Findlay on what he said to Parliament today. The Young Persons Guideline, which has been developed by the Scottish Sentencing Council, makes it clear that all sentencing options, including imprisonment, remain open to the court. So it is absolutely vital that that is understood by the public. Now, I will set out that our approach has got to be about education and early intervention and prevention. That's why we invest so much in measures such as the Violence Reduction Unit work and the Mentors in Violence Prevention. And we undertake that work, and we have seen over a 15-year period a sustained fall in knife crime in our society. But I come back to what I said in my first answer. One incident, one tragedy is one too many. But it is vital that it is understood, particularly by those who might perpetrate these offences, that it remains a possibility that imprisonment can be undertaken, and Parliament should properly understand the requirements of the law.
Russell Findlay.
If John Swinney won't listen to me, then perhaps he'll listen to the parents of victims. Here's the mum of a teenager whose daughter was subject to a horrific assault which was filmed. My girl cannot return to school or leave home. She lives in fear while her attacker faces no punishment. The system is broken. Here's the mum of a teenage boy who was the subject of a homophobic attack which was filmed. His attackers face no consequences. We cannot come to terms with what is happening in Scotland. Serious crime is being downgraded. The clear message to us and our son is that people can do what they want to him because he just doesn't matter enough. And here's the mum, a mum who's too fearful to include details of her child's ordeal. Many of the bad kids are in gangs and know there are zero consequences for their actions. Good kids are paying a heavy price. Who is going to stand up and do something that will actually make an impact? Parents want a return to discipline in schools and deterrence in the justice system. So why won't John Swinney listen to them?
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, I fear that Russell Findlay has not been listening to my answers today, because my answers are a combination of the proactive and preventative work which is undertaken by a number of very successful organisations, which over a period since 2008-9 have seen a 69% decrease in emergency hospital admissions due to assault with a sharp object. Now, that is us tackling knife crime in our society. So that prevention work is having an effect. Scotland is a safer country today than it has been in the past. But as I return to my point that one incident is one incident too many. Having said so, that is the work on prevention, which I believe is absolutely vital. But the public cannot look at this exchange and believe there are no consequences for carrying a knife or carrying out an incident. I repeat, the Scottish Sentencing Council guidelines indicate for young people that if all sentencing options, including imprisonment, remain open to the court. So that is what the law says. That's what the guidelines say. And people need to understand the consequences of carrying a knife and committing an offence. There is a risk of imprisonment, and I encourage people to follow the advice issued by Police Scotland on Wednesday, that under no circumstances should young people carry knives in our society. It is dangerous, it is damaging, and young people should not do it.
Question number 2, Anna Sarwar.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Like millions across Scotland, I was devastated to hear of the fatal stabbing of 16-year-old Caden Moy over the weekend. Caden was a beloved son from East Kilbride, a young life full of promise stolen in an instant. And tragically, he's not the first. Many parents fear that due to a culture of violence going unchallenged, that he won't be the last. Just one day before Caden's death, another young man was stabbed, this time at Portobello. And the statistics are damning. The number of young people caught with knives is rising. And among 11 to 15-year-olds, a 15% increase in just 5 years. Many parents are rightly worried, and they fear their children are not safe, and they're asking how this government has allowed this to get so out of control.
First Minister.
As I indicated in my answers to Mr Findlay, the government takes a combination of measures in relation to these issues. First of all, we are proactively taking forward education programmes on the danger and the unacceptability of carrying a knife and taking part in violence, and that advice was reinforced by the Assistant Chief Constable Tim Mayers on Wednesday in his public statements. Secondly, there is in place effective punishment where offences are committed. And thirdly, there is sustained school and community engagement with young people around making sure that we create responsible citizens in our society. And as I've indicated, I share the devastation about the loss of young lives as a consequence of any violence in our society. And Mr Sarwar and I will share that devastation. What I assure him about is the government will take forward a combination of measures of early intervention and education, but also the resort to punishment if it is required where incidents have been committed. And that is the approach that the government will take and work with Police Scotland to deliver in our communities.
Anna Sarwar.
Presiding Officer, John Swinney ignores the wider systemic challenges because the crisis didn't emerge overnight. It's been years in the making. Since the SNP created Police Scotland, we have lost 800 officers. And since 2017, the SNP has cut 730 officers from local divisions and shut countless local police stations. And now we're hearing horrifying reports of children, primary school children, being caught carrying knives. And this is not a coincidence. The SNP have cut police officers, they've shut police stations, they've decimated youth work services, mismanaged our justice system so badly that every day 500 police officers are stuck in courtrooms with 90% not even giving evidence. And they broke our NHS to the point that police officers are stuck in A&E wards having to escort patients when they should be on the streets fighting crime. So isn't what we're seeing now a direct consequence of SNP decisions and SNP failures?
First Minister.
What I'd say to Mr Sarwar is that, and I will inevitably Presiding Officer, rely on material I've already used in the answers to Russell Findlay. But since 2008-9, which precedes the creation of Police Scotland, there has been a 69% decrease in emergency hospital admissions due to assault with a sharp object. So, over time, a long series of time, Scottish society has become safer at the very time that we have undertaken the reform of the police service and the creation of Police Scotland. Now, we have recorded crime data which shows there has been a 55% fall in attempted murder and serious assault, with homicides remaining at a near-record low in our society today. And we also have, in addition to that recorded crime data, the latest Scottish Crime and Justice Survey, which captures incidents not reported to the police as well as those that are. That reveals that crime has fallen 53% since 2008-9. So I totally understand the points that Mr Sarwar is putting to me, but the evidence indicates that, and I come back to my point, that one incident is absolutely unacceptable and devastating. So I don't diminish that at all. But overall, Scottish society is safer today than it was before we created Police Scotland. That is the outcome that has been achieved as a consequence of the reform the government put in place to create a single police service that serves every community in our country.
Anna Sarwar.
I think John Swinney should get out and speak to some of the parents directly and hear what they feel about SNP justice. Presiding Officer, there are no more powerful words on this serious issue than those of Mum Vicky Donald, and I think it's important that we end on Vicky Donald's words. Her daughter was just 13 when she was viciously assaulted on the way to school, and today in the Daily Record, Vicky has written an open letter to John Swinney, saying this is not just a tragedy, it's a failure of the systems, structures and leadership meant to protect our children. This isn't about reputation or reports, it's about reality, it's about life and death. And she asks, when will the Scottish Government stand up and say, enough is enough? She asks, when will you stop hiding behind procedures and start putting real consequences in place for violent behaviour among youths? And she asks, when will early intervention become the priority and not just a buzzword? And she demands, stop waiting for more funerals, do something now.
First Minister.
Well, Mr Sarwar invites me to speak to the parents, and that, of course, is what I have done, because in January I convened a gathering at the instigation of Vicky Donald, who came to the gathering with leaders of all political parties. Pauline McNeill attended on behalf of the Scottish Labour Party. There were colleagues from all parties there, and I welcome that engagement around the table. So I've sat with parents and listened very directly to their feedback. I've seen the letter from Vicky Donald, and I've replied to Vicky Donald this morning. One of the points I've made in the letter is that while it is of no comfort to victims of violence and their families, knife crime has fallen, and the number of homicide victims aged 13 to 19 years old has decreased by 79%. Now, that is some of the progress that I think has come about because of the prevention work that the government has been taking forward. Now, when it comes to that prevention work, we have a number of different elements. Education Scotland delivers the Mentors in Violence Prevention programme, which is delivered in all local authority areas in the country, and I welcome the engagement of schools and local authorities. And I've seen this programme in action in my own constituency, and it is powerful and emphatic, and the young people themselves become the advocates for violence prevention. We also have the work of Medics Against Violence, which engages with young people in youth clubs on the consequences of violence. And YouthLink Scotland takes forward the No Knives Better Lives training to hundreds of practitioners. We're also supporting the outstanding work, which is internationally renowned, of the Scottish Violence Reduction Unit to expand its reach across Scotland, including in Glasgow, Dundee, Edinburgh and now in Ayrshire. So I say that to hopefully reassure Mr Sarwar and members of the public and Vicky Donald that the government is very focused on this. And I reiterate the point I made to Mr Findlay a moment ago. There are punishments available which the courts can decide to apply, and they can involve imprisonment. So nobody should be under any illusion that there are no consequences of being involved in the unacceptable actions of knife crime or violence. And that will be the sustained approach the Government takes forward. And I will be very happy to engage, as I engaged with all political parties in January, on what collectively we can consider to address this issue. And there's a follow-up discussion which the Justice Secretary is convening in June on these questions. In the light of these issues, I will attend that discussion as well to make sure, and I'll invite others, colleagues and members of the youth work sector to be involved in that too, to make sure we leave no stone unturned in addressing the issues, because one case is one case too many.
Question number 3, Lorna Slater.
The Climate Change Committee's report this week shows that Scotland's carbon emissions are on a disastrous trajectory. They are telling us that immediate action at pace and scale is needed to cut emissions so that Scotland can meet its new carbon budgets and build a path to net zero that creates good jobs and saves people money too. That means we need a proper plan for warmer homes that are cheaper to heat and real investment to make public transport available and affordable, to get people out of their cars. The First Minister often tells us how proud he is of balancing Scotland's financial budget every year. So what immediate actions will he take in order to balance Scotland's first carbon budget?
First Minister.
President, first of all, I welcome the advice that we've received from the Climate Change Committee. The Government will carefully consider the advice before setting out our proposed carbon budgets in secondary legislation in due course. Now, I want to assure Lorna Slater that the Government is absolutely committed to meeting our target of net zero emissions by 2045. We've recently taken forward a number of vital climate measures in the budget, which the Green Party, I was very pleased, were able to support earlier on this year. And we have, of course, added to that another measure to make public transport more affordable, which is the abolition of peak rail fares from the 1st of September. Now, I hope that's taken as an example of good faith of what the Government is trying to do to prioritise action on climate.
Lorna Slater.
First Minister, your government has spent the last year ripping up policies designed to tackle the climate emergency. And I know the First Minister knows that delaying action on climate actually costs more in the long run. Analysis from Global Witness shows that climate damage is already costing Scottish households £3,000 every year on average, while multinational fossil fuel giants are still raking in billions of pounds of profit. Unless polluters pay, communities will be worse off, and the super-rich will just keep getting richer. So that we can invest now, not only to save money later, but to create green jobs and opportunities that we know will benefit Scotland. Will the First Minister support policies to tax polluters?
First Minister.
Well, as I said in my earlier answer, the Government will bring forward its plans in due course to respond to the Climate Change Committee, whose contribution I very much welcome. We are taking a range of measures. For example, we had commitments to create 6,000 public charge points for electric vehicles, for example, which helps that shift to electric vehicles in the country. And we've exceeded that target 2 years early. Yesterday, I had the pleasure, along with the Secretary of State for Scotland, to be at the announcement of a regional selective assistance grant, which goes alongside investment from the Scottish National Investment Bank and the National Wealth Fund of the United Kingdom Government in the green aircraft engine developer Zero Avia at the Advanced Manufacturing Innovation District in Renfrewshire, which is a splendid example about how investment in new technology which reduces emissions can also help to create 350 jobs in Renfrewshire, which I think is a step in the right direction.
Question number 4, Willie Coffey.
Thank you. To ask the First Minister what assessment the Scottish Government has made regarding any implications for its work to grow Scotland's economy of the analysis from Future Economy Scotland, indicating that average earnings in Scotland are £15,000 less per year than they would have been if wages had not flatlined since the financial crisis.
First Minister.
So Scotland's economy has been robust despite significant economic challenges. Since 2007, Scotland's GDP per person has increased by more than the overall United Kingdom's. Our labour market remains resilient, Our programme for government includes measures to support economic security and growth, but it is right to recognise the effect of UK government austerity and damaging decisions on issues like migration and Brexit has had on Scottish living standards, which has created the circumstances accounted for by the Future Economy Scotland report.
Willie Coffey.
Thank the First Minister for that answer. Future Economy Scotland's report lays bare the sheer cost of the Union and Westminster economic mismanagement. This is a vast sum for Scots who could have put this money towards saving for their first homes, keeping it warm, feeding their families, or saving for retirement. Does the First Minister agree with me that this is a clear indication that the Union and Westminster austerity, now embraced by Labour, just aren't working for Scotland, and can he outline what his government is doing to combat this?
First Minister.
Sir, it is absolutely beyond question that the effect of austerity and Brexit has reduced the living standards of people in Scotland. That is inescapable reality. And of course, all of that was presided over and ushered in and nurtured and coaxed into reality by the Conservative government. The damage that has been done to the lives of individuals and their livelihoods is colossal. Now, what the Scottish Government is doing is taking forward a number of measures to tackle the cost of living challenges that people face in Scotland. Council tax is about 30% lower on average than it is in England, 20% lower water bills. We have free prescriptions in Scotland. Those families who send their children to Scottish universities don't pay tuition fees. And, of course, we have just added to that the abolition of peak rail fares for good. So the Scottish Government is acting within our powers.
Let's hear the First Minister.
We are acting in the Scottish Government within our powers and responsibilities to tackle the very issues that Mr Coffey puts to me. But I am absolutely certain that Scotland's position will be enhanced if we had the full powers of independence to enable us to deliver a better economic future, just like many of our neighbours are able to do at this time.
Question number 5, Graham Simpson.
Thank you. To ask the First Minister what the Scottish Government's response is to the Hunter Foundation report, Lessons from Singapore for Scotland's Economy.
First Minister.
Officer, I welcome the report from the Hunter Foundation and share the aim to boost economic growth and secure a prosperous future for the next generation of Scots. I particularly agree with Sir Tom Hunter's comments that we in Scotland need a separate immigration policy which suits our circumstances and can help to boost our workforce. I do hope that the United Kingdom Government will take these calls into consideration.
Graham Simpson.
Well, can I thank the First Minister for that response? He will no doubt have been delighted that Sir Tom Hunter has hinted that he, the First Minister, is paid too little. But Sir Tom can't get everything right. He does want radical action to reverse what he calls Scotland's managed decline. He references falling standards in education for the past 2 decades, some of the worst health outcomes in Europe, and a demographic ticking time bomb. The report also highlights how Scotland continues to punish the entrepreneurial community with high tax rates, with a top tax rate of 48% here, compared to just 24% in booming Singapore. So does the First Minister not recognise that lower, simpler taxes can actually boost government revenues, inspire innovation and lead to extra investment?
First Minister.
On the question of entrepreneurship, one of the areas of policy that I've been closely associated with in all my parliamentary involvement has been the whole field of entrepreneurial activity. And I think by anyone's estimation, Scotland now has a very supportive innovation and entrepreneurship system that is available. The Tech Scaler programme that the Deputy First Minister leads is generating significant economic benefits and generating significant wealth in Scotland. Now, the key challenge in all of these questions is about how we generate sufficient economic activity to support our investment in people and in public services. And I believe that part of the approach that is correct in Scotland is to make sure we raise the revenue that can invest in our public services. Now, Mr Simpson advocates for a position, and his frontbench position is to reduce public expenditure by £1 billion. Now, they often shout. They often shout at me about it, but what they don't shout at me is how they will actually reduce public expenditure without harming the people of Scotland and telling us the hard realities. So, if the Conservative Party is prepared to share that detail with the public, then I'll be very pleased to listen to it. But what is clear to me is that the Scottish Government is taking the right steps to raise revenue and to invest in our public services and to improve the outcomes for the people of Scotland.
Colin Beattie.
The majority of people already pay less tax in Scotland than they would elsewhere in the UK. And by asking those with the broadest shoulders to contribute a bit more, we can fund the vital services that benefit us all. Can the First Minister say any more about how this progressive taxation system helps provide Scots with the most comprehensive social contract anywhere in the UK?
First Minister.
President Officer, it is a matter of fact that more than half of Scottish taxpayers continue to pay less income tax in this financial year than if they lived elsewhere
Let's hear
in
the First
the
Minister.
United Kingdom.
First Minister. To those who are shouting from their seats, I would ask that you desist. First Minister.
In order that Parliament hears properly what I'm saying, it is a fact that more than half of Scottish taxpayers continue to pay less income tax in 25-26 than if they lived elsewhere in the United Kingdom. What that generates, according to the Scottish Fiscal Commission, is the policy choices we have made raises up to an additional £1.7 billion in this financial year, which helps to pay for the best cost of living package of support in the United Kingdom, including free prescriptions, an expansive early learning and childcare offer, free eye care tests and bus travel for 2.3 million people, and of course free higher education. Now, if the Conservatives want to get rid of the overwhelming majority of what I've just set out, that's up to them, but I'm not going to follow their advice.
Question number 6, Faisal Chowdhury.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the First Minister, in light of recent reported incidents, how the Scottish Government is working to prevent knife crime. First Minister.
President Officer, as I've indicated in my earlier answers, my heartfelt sympathies go out to all those affected by the appalling knife crime incidents seen in Irvine and Portobello over the last weekend. We have invested more than £6 million since 2023 in our violence prevention framework, supporting a range of targeted prevention and early intervention activity in schools, hospitals and across communities, working with partners to tackle violence and its harms.
Faisal Chowdhury.
Thank the First Minister for the answer. After the tragic death of a 16-year-old boy from East Kilbride last week, 3 young people have now been killed in youth stabbing in the past year. Since March, there has been 11 stabbings involving young people, including multiple in Portobello, Edinburgh. These incidents are destroying lives and traumatizing communities. And the problem seems to be getting worse, with police seizing 248 weapons in schools last year. Will the First Minister intervene and request the Scottish Violence Reduction Unit incentivise their efforts? Will he say enough is enough and deliver youth work and policing which reaches out to young people and prevent further incidents?
Minister.
Those are the actions that we are taking, and the Scottish Violence Reduction Unit, as I indicated in my answer to Mr Sarwar earlier on, is internationally acknowledged to have deployed very significant and effective interventions to reduce the level of knife crime in society. Now, I would not want Parliament to consider for a moment that I am in any way not accepting the seriousness and the significance of these issues. One incident is one incident too many, but we have tried and tested methods of addressing the issue of knife crime. We have to make sure those methods remain effective in all that we do to ensure that young people and communities are protected.
Colette Stevenson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. And as the First Minister is fully aware, Caden Moy from East Kilbride tragically lost his life at the weekend, and the community is reeling. Investigations are ongoing and the police must be given the space to carry out their work. I would ask people, including anyone who was at Irvine Beach on Saturday, to contact police if they have any information that may be relevant to the investigation. Can the First Minister confirm how the programme for government will focus resources on the justice system, but also on diverting young people from antisocial behaviour and offending so that we can prevent future tragedies? And does he agree with me that the work of No Knives, Better Lives and Medics Against Violence is crucial in preventing violence in the first place?
First Minister.
I agree with Colette Stevenson about the methods that have been taken to address this issue. We need to make sure they remain effective. We must be open to challenging the content of these programmes to ensure they are effective. As I've referred to, there was very clear words issued by Assistant Chief Constable Tim Mayers on the 20th of May, in which he said the key message to children and young people is they shouldn't be carrying knives. It is absolutely the wrong thing to do. The tragic consequences at the weekend demonstrate how horrific, in a second, the fact that you're carrying a knife with you can be, and how it can end lives immediately. The clear message is do not carry weapons, do not carry knives. Now, that is at the heart of the work of the Violence Prevention Framework for Scotland, the Cashback for Communities programme and the other measures which emphasise again that no one should carry a knife.
Miles Briggs.
I've listened to what the First Minister said in a number of answers today, but he needs to acknowledge the real concerning trend we are seeing in Scotland. Violent crimes amongst young people in Edinburgh have doubled in 1 year alone. 529 alleged offences were reported to a child reporter last year. Children as young as 8 have been reported for alleged violent incidents here in the capital. Now, speaking to Police Scotland, there is a disturbing trend now of gang culture developing as well. So can I ask the First Minister, what impact does he believe significant cuts to youth services and centres is having in this, and why is that trend not being acknowledged today? First Minister.
As I've indicated in a number of my answers, the Government is investing in a sustained number of programmes through Youth Link Scotland, through the Violence Reduction Unit, through the Mentors in Violence Reduction programme to address these very issues. And these are serious and significant issues, but in a longer-term period, we have seen a significant fall in knife crime. What we have to ensure is that the programmes we have in place now remain effective and impactful in addressing the circumstances that Mr Briggs has put to me today.
Thank you. We move to general and constituency supplementaries, and I call Karen Adam.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Once again, Scotland's fishers are utterly betrayed by a London-based Westminster government, this time by Labour and their EU-UK deal. Can I ask the First Minister how the Scottish Government will continue to support fishers, particularly in my constituency of Banffshire and Buchan Coast, and assure him that his government will always put Scotland's fisheries first?
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, not for the first time, the fishing communities of Scotland have been judged to be expendable. This time it's by a Labour government, the last time it was by a Conservative government. So what the people of Scotland know is that whether it's a Labour government or a Tory government, they'll sell out the Scottish fishing industry. My government will support the industry. We'll do what we can to assist the communities to overcome the obstacles put in their way by the deals made by the Labour and Conservative governments. And of course, the only way in which the fishing industry in Scotland will be properly protected is with the powers of independence.
Liam Kerr.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. North East Scotland College calculates it's been underfunded by around £30 million over the last decade, and that results in fewer places for domestic students and threatens the North East's economic future. The college says it is a funding system that is significantly disadvantaging the people and employers of the North East. Now, the SFC's recent funding allocation includes a substantial rural premium for 9 colleges, but not for Nescol. Will the First Minister urgently contact the SFC about restoring the rurality premium before it's too late?
First Minister.
Well, as Mr Kerr will know, the Funding Council operates at arm's length for government. That's what the law requires. The government makes an allocation to the Funding Council, which has seen a 2% uplift in the college budget in the resource allocation for colleges, and then it's a matter for the Funding Council, and that's what the law requires, the Funding Council to take those decisions independently of government. But here we are again with a Conservative member coming here, pressing me about the public finances. Graham Simpson, his colleague, two along from him, has just asked me to cut taxes by £1 billion, and Liam Kerr wants me to increase public expenditure. If that does not demonstrate the incoherence of the Conservative Party, the incoherence is sitting just two aside from each other over on the Conservative benches, utterly and completely incoherent.
Carol Mockin.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Is the First Minister aware that Stagecoach West Scotland drivers are the lowest paid of any Stagecoach bus drivers across the UK? And simply by trying to stand up for themselves, the company has tried to reduce leave and, over a planned strike period, cancelled all existing leave, causing much distress to everyone. This is just one of the many tactics by Stagecoach to prevent ordinary workers from having any say in their conditions. Does the First Minister agree with me that these drivers do deserve a fair pay deal?
First Minister.
Obviously, the services that are provided by the bus drivers are critical to the mobility of the constituents that Carol Mochin represents, and I would obviously want to avoid any possible disruption to the delivery of transport services and bus services in the area. So I would encourage all parties to work together to find an agreement to enable the inconvenience that Carol Mochin raises to be avoided for members of the public and for services to operate as planned.
Kid.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. A new report from Scottish Care shows the immense contribution of immigration to Scotland's care sector. Can the FM respond to the concerns in this report that Westminster's approach to immigration could end up collapsing the care sector in Scotland? And will he commit his government to reject the disgraceful anti-immigration rhetoric of Nigel Farage and those who seem determined to imitate him?
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, on Tuesday I convened a discussion involving representatives of a very broad range of sectors in Scotland across social care, the National Health Service, the food and drink sector, the engineering and construction sectors, the education sector within Scotland, to discuss the United Kingdom Government's white paper on immigration. It was absolutely chilling to hear the anxiety of different sectors in Scotland about the issues which arise because of the fact that we have a shrinking working age population, and we need migration to boost that working age population. Now, in the social care, Scottish Care gave me a briefing paper which indicates that 26% of the total social care workforce covered by their survey of members are international workers, 11,294. Now, how the United Kingdom Government believes we will be able to operate social care services with the type of hostile approach that is contained within the White Paper is beyond me. So there needs to be a very serious engagement about the implications of the White Paper, because it will be devastating for countless sectors in the Scottish economy, and the Scottish Government will not in any way, shape or form engage in the type of rhetoric that the Prime Minister engaged in a week past Monday. It was absolutely appalling rhetoric, and it represents the wrong policy position. We need migration to boost our working age population, and that will be the sustained position of the Scottish Government.
Jackie Bailey.
Presiding Officer, I want to raise the tragic case of Isla Snedden, who died at the age of 17 after a 6-month battle with cancer. Isla first went to her GP in 2022 with lumps in her breast. In June 2024, the GP made an urgent referral to the breast clinic for biopsy, but this was downgraded to routine. By the time she was diagnosed, she had a sarcoma in the lining of her heart. The cancer had spread from her breast to her lungs and lymph nodes. If she had been an adult, the biopsy would have been urgent. It was downgraded because she was under 18. Will the First Minister ensure that there is explicit guidance that suspicion of cancer in children and young people must be treated with the same urgency as for adults?
First Minister.
I'm very sorry to hear the details that Jackie Bailey has shared with me about Isla, and I express my sympathies to her family. She makes a compelling case, and I will take that issue away. The Health Secretary is. I'll raise it with the Health Secretary, and we'll pursue it in relation to clinical guidance, because I understand exactly the significance of the point that Jackie Bailey has raised with me.
John Mason.
Thank you. Would the First Minister agree with me that we saw deplorable scenes at and around football over the weekend, not least at Glasgow Cross, which is shared between CoCab Stewart and myself? Does he have any suggestions as to how we can prevent this in future, for example, by the clubs taking more responsibility?
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, there were unacceptable instances at the weekend. I understand completely the desire of football fans to celebrate the achievements and the performance of their teams, but whether it's the incident that took place at Tannadice, where a chair was thrown at an Aberdeen Football Club player, which seems to have emerged from the Aberdeen football supporters, or the disorder that took place in the boundary of Mr Mason's constituency at Glasgow Cross, is totally unacceptable. Celebrations are fine, but they shouldn't inconvenience other people, and they shouldn't harm other people in any way, shape or form. So we will work closely with Police Scotland, with the football authorities, and the Justice Secretary will shortly be holding a discussion with key partners to discuss these issues and to ensure that we challenge everybody, including the clubs, to do everything we can to ensure that football is safe for supporters and that we minimise disruption for local communities.
That concludes First Minister's questions. The next item of business is a member's business debate in the name of Kevin Stewart, and there will now be a short suspension to allow those leaving the chamber and the public gallery to do so before that item of business begins.